Have you ever tried to mentally map out where a creator or, a higher power actually resides?
Oh, that's a tough one. Most people just default to like pointing up at the sky.
Right, exactly. But I don't mean just conceptualizing some vague presence or a feeling in the room. I mean attempting to draw a literal structural map of the
Like
universe.
an actual blueprint.
Yeah, a blueprint where you can point to a specific coordinate and say, right there, that is the exact command center of existence.
Which is wild because it forces a collision between two things we normally keep totally separated.
How so?
Well, we usually put spiritual concepts into this bucket of the intangible, right? The
Yeah.
ethereal. And then we put physical geometry into the bucket of hard science.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So merging a metaphysical presence with a strict topographical map of reality,
Mm.
I mean, that is an entirely different intellectual exercise.
It really is. And that's exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We are looking at a fascinating, incredibly dense translated exchange from 2019.
Between two thinkers identified as Yixian Celestial and Fuifeng.
Right. And in this Q&A, they sit down and actually map this out. Not as a metaphor, as a literal functional cosmology.
It strips away all that usual mystical vagueness we're used to.
Exactly. They attempt to provide structural, almost mathematical answers to the nature of reality. They break down the geography of existence, define a mechanical trinity that powers it, and make this razor-sharp distinction between the Tao and the Wei.
And by the end of this deep dive, you are going to have a completely new lens through which to view the physical world around you.
Promise. So let's just jump right into the source material.
Yeah, the text itself wastes zero time on pleasantries. It immediately lays down a highly specific blueprint.
It really does.
Suifeng establishes a framework consisting of 20 parallel worlds existing within 36 dimensional spaces.
Okay, wait, pause. If you try to hold 20 parallel worlds and 36 dimensions in your head simultaneously, it just feels like, I don't know, intellectual static.
It's a lot to process, yeah.
Why define it with such rigid parameters? Usually when philosophical texts talk about the universe, they just rely on the concept of infinity and leave it at that.
Well, because dealing with infinity is practically useless if you actually want to understand how a localized system functions.
Oh, localized. That's the key word here.
Exactly. Shofeng specifies very early on that this map, these 20 worlds in 36 dimensions, it doesn't describe the grand, infinite cosmos. It describes the Earth universe.
The small universe.
Right. It is a localized, bounded system.
And framing it that way entirely changes how you approach the text. I mean, think about it. If you want to understand how a single human cell works, you don't look at the entire human population.
No, you draw a boundary around that one cell.
Right, you look at the nucleus, you study the mitochondria. By isolating the Earth universe, the text turns existence into a closed mechanical system that we can actually pull apart and examine.
And within that closed system, Yixian Celestial asks the pivotal question, where does the greatest creator actually reside?
The ultimate where are you question.
Yeah. And the text provides a strictly geometric answer. It states that the essence of the creator resides in the zero world of these 36 dimensions.
The zero world. Which sounds like a sci-fi movie title.
It does, but Shuofeng describes this zero world as a foundational node. The analogy used in the text is the 0 point on an XYZ axis in mathematics.
Okay, like a graph.
Right. The exact origin where length, width, and depth intersect. And from this 0 point, the 20 parallel worlds are connected, acting as a centralized command center.
So everything branches out from there.
Exactly. The text actually compares this mechanism directly to how a brain and central nervous system operate within a human body.
Oh, that makes sense. The core intelligence is localized in the head, but its sensory and operational network spans the entirety of the body.
Exactly.
But I have to push back a little on the text's XYZ axis analogy.
Why is that?
Because it creates a visualization problem for the reader. An XYZ graph is strictly three-dimensional. When you try to picture 36 different dimensions mathematically intersecting at one 0 point on a piece of graph paper, your brain kind of just hits a wall.
Yeah, the geometry breaks down completely.
Yeah.
We only have the biological hardware to perceive 3 spatial dimensions.
Right. Pushing a three-dimensional model to explain a 36-dimensional space, it inevitably creates friction. The text needs a localized origin point to explain the structure, but the graph paper analogy falls a bit short.
So how would you visualize it for the listener?
Well, to make the mechanism behind this zero world clear, I think we need to step away from spatial geometry entirely. Think about the device you're using right now to listen to this.
Okay, like a computer or a smartphone.
Yeah. Picture the file system on a computer. You have all these different environments,
Yeah.
right? Your desktop, your documents folder, your photo library, different user profiles.
So those would be the 20 parallel worlds.
Exactly. Let's call those the parallel worlds. And they exist within highly complex, nested folder structures, which would be the 36 dimensions.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
But if you trace every single file, every application, every complex operating environment, all the way back down through the directory tree, where do they all originate from?
One fundamental location, the root directory.
Boom, the root folder. Applying a digital architecture model clarifies Weifeng's point perfectly, don't you think?
It really does, because the root directory doesn't look like a photo, and it doesn't function like a word processor. It lacks the specific characteristics of the parallel worlds it contains.
Right, it's just the foundational node.
But every other dimension and world is structurally dependent on it. If you sever the connection to the root directory, or if the root is deleted, the entire 36-dimensional system collapses instantly.
It is the absolute anchor of reality, but establishing the root folder only solves the problem of where. It just defines the structural architecture.
Right, a map is just a map.
Exactly. A computer with a perfectly organized root directory is still just a dead piece of plastic and silicon until you turn it on. If the 0 point is the structural command center, we have to understand what exactly is flowing out of it to animate these 20 parallel worlds.
Which is exactly where the text goes next.
Yeah.
Yixian Celestial recognizes that structural limitation and asks Weifeng to explain 3 recurring terms in their spiritual corpus.
The essence, the consciousness, and the spirit of the creator.
Yes, and Xuefeng breaks these down into a very specific trinity. First, essence is defined as the non-material structure of life.
Okay, structure.
Second, consciousness is defined as the soul. And third, spirit is defined as energy.
Let's not just list those out, though. We really need to unpack the actual mechanics of what those definitions mean for the listener.
Fair enough, because Weifeng claims that these 3 elements perfectly mirror the universe itself. The universe consists of structure, consciousness, and energy.
Which is a principle of fractal reflection, right? The anatomy of the creator and the anatomy of the localized universe operate on the exact same fundamental mechanics.
Spot on. So when Xifeng defines essence as the non-material structure of life, we are talking about the blueprint.
Like the architectural plan.
Right. It has no physical weight or mass, but it dictates the boundaries and rules of everything that does have weight and mass.
And then spirit is defined purely as energy, which is super interesting because that strips away all the usual ghostly, ethereal connotations we associate with the word spirit.
Yeah, it's not a misty apparition floating in a haunted house. It is raw, kinetic, potential force.
It is the animating power.
Exactly. And to explain how this plays out geographically across the 36 dimensions, the text offers this geopolitical analogy to separate the essence from the spirit.
Oh, right, the president of China analogy.
Yeah. The text compares the system to the president of China. It states that the president's physical body resides in Beijing. That is a centralized, highly specific location.
Which would be the 0 point.
Right. However, his authority, his influence, and the execution of his will extend outward, permeating every province and city in the whole country.
So functionally, it is a model of localized structure versus decentralized execution.
Precisely.
The essence, the structural authority remains completely stationary at the 0 point, the central hub. But the spirit, the raw energy that executes that authority, is omnipresent. It has to flow into every corner of the 20 parallel worlds to keep the system active.
Which leaves the final component of the Trinity, consciousness.
The soul.
Yes. Xuefeng explicitly links consciousness to the soul. If essence is the structure and spirit is the energy, consciousness is the awareness that emerges when those two interact.
The awareness. That makes sense.
And the text actually takes this a step further by mapping this cosmic principle directly onto human behavior. It argues that everything non-natural created on Earth is quite literally a physical manifestation of human consciousness.
That part blew my mind. They use constitutional law as the primary example of this, right?
They do. The text argues that constitutional law is simply the congealed collective consciousness of a society.
Which, when you think about it, is totally true. A law itself has no physical reality. It is just an invisible agreement about fairness, order, and morality.
But because human consciousness holds on to that structure, It eventually manifests physical weight in the real world.
Yeah, we build courthouses, we print physical contracts, we hire police officers, we establish borders. The physical infrastructure of human civilization is literally just human consciousness rendered into matter.
It's a brilliant way to explain it.
It is, but while the constitutional law example is logically sound, it feels a bit, I don't know, academic, a little dry for a deep dive.
Fair point. How would you spice it up?
To truly grasp how structure, energy, and consciousness operate simultaneously as a trinity, the computer analogy we used earlier scales up perfectly into a modern video game.
Oh, I like that.
Think about a massive, open-world multiplayer game.
Okay, so how do you map the specific definitions of essence, spirit, and consciousness onto a game environment?
First, you have the essence, which Feng defines as the non-material structure. In our game, that is the source code.
Ah, the code sitting at the 0 point.
Exactly, the root folder. The code is completely invisible to the player. It is just math and logic. You never actually see the code rendering on your screen, but it absolutely dictates the boundaries of the reality.
It decides how high your character can jump, what color the sky is, how fast objects fall.
Yes. It is the architectural blueprint of that specific digital universe. But source code sitting on a hard drive does absolutely nothing on its own.
It needs power.
Right. It requires the second element, spirit, which Feng defines as energy. In our analogy, spirit is the literal electrical current from your wall outlet.
The electricity power in the console.
Yes. The electricity doesn't know what the code is, it's just raw blind power. But when that electrical energy flows through the structural source code, the system comes alive.
Which leaves consciousness, the soul.
The consciousness is the gameplay experience itself. It is the narrative, the choices, the active awareness of moving through that world. The code and the electricity are required to generate it, but the consciousness is the actual meaning of the system.
Wow, that actually maps perfectly onto Gleithing's point about human consciousness manifesting physical things, too.
How so?
Well, when millions of players log into that game and build virtual cities or form alliances, those digital cities are the direct, tangible manifestation of the player's collective consciousness interacting with the game's structure and energy.
Exactly. You cannot isolate one element and still have a functional universe. Without the structural essence, the energy has no direction.
And without the energy, the structure is just dead potential.
Right. And without consciousness, the entire system has no observer and no purpose. The creator and the Earth universe are both bound by this totally interdependent trinity.
So if we recap where we are, we have the map of the universe, the 20 worlds and 36 dimensions rooted at the 0 point. And we know the trinity powering it, the source code, the electricity, and the gameplay experience.
Check. Which forces us to confront the final and honestly most practical question in the text.
The big one.
If we are existing inside this massive structured system, what are the rules of the game? How are you actually supposed to operate within it?
And that brings us to the conceptual climax of the exchange. It all hinges on decoding a distinction that most people completely gloss over.
The difference between the Tao and the way of the greatest creator.
Yes, because in common conversation, and honestly, even in a lot of translated philosophical texts, people use the Tao and the way interchangeably.
Oh, all the time. You hear both terms and you automatically assume they are just like stylistic variations of the exact same idea.
But treating them as synonyms entirely erases the functional mechanism that Suifan is trying to explain. The text draws a rigid, impermeable boundary between the two concepts.
Okay, so let's break them apart. What is the Tao?
First, Shuifeng states that the Tao is the manifestation of the creator's consciousness. And because the creator's consciousness permeates the system, all things run in Tao and are dominated by it. Consequently, all things have spirit.
Wait, if the Tao is the overarching consciousness and it dominates everything, it leaves no room for anything to exist outside of it.
Exactly. Shuifeng clarifies the mechanism further by defining the Tao strictly as the general law and principle of the universe.
The underlying physics of reality.
Yes, it is the inescapable framework in which the 20 parallel worlds operate.
But if the Tao is the inescapable physics of reality, then what is left for the way to be?
According to the text, the way of the greatest creator is an action.
An action.
Specifically, it is the act of proceeding in accordance with the creator's intention. It is the behavioral choice to act in harmony with natural principles.
Okay, that distinction fundamentally reframes how you interact with reality. So is it accurate to say that the Tao is the environment and the way is your behavior within that environment?
That is the perfect summary. Yes. The Tao is the deterministic structure you inhabit. The way is your volitional response to it.
Ooh, let's apply this back to the physics engine analogy. Imagine a massive, complex physics simulation. The Tao is gravity.
Right.
It is thermodynamics. It is the unbreakable law of motion. You are inside the simulation, and therefore you are dominated by the Tao. You cannot pause gravity.
You definitely cannot negotiate with thermodynamics.
No, the Tao simply is.
You are subject to the general laws of the universe regardless of your personal beliefs or your mood or your awareness.
Exactly. But the way is how you choose to operate within those physics. Like if you want to fly and you choose to jump off a cliff while frantically flapping your bare arms, you are going to hit the ground.
Hard.
Very hard. And you are still inside the Tao. Gravity worked perfectly, but you acted in direct opposition to the natural principles of aerodynamics. You ignored the structure, created massive friction, and suffered the consequences.
Conversely, finding the way means studying the Tao. You observe gravity, you understand fluid dynamics, and you build an airplane wing.
You align your actions with the structural rules. You choose to row with the river's current instead of fighting against it.
And the reason this distinction is so vital for you, as the listener, is because it injects free will and agency into what otherwise seems like a rigidly determined universe.
That's a huge point.
If the Tao and the Way were identical, your life would be entirely passive. You would just be a leaf drifting on the wind, with zero responsibility for your trajectory.
But Shuifeng is saying you are not a passive observer. You are an active participant. You are forced to exist inside the Tao, but walking the way requires constant, deliberate agency.
It requires high-level critical thinking and a deep awareness of the structure, energy, and consciousness operating around you.
Which is hard to do nowadays.
It is. We live in an era characterized by overwhelming information density and constant reactionary pressure. People often move frantically, burning vast amounts of energy, fighting against their own nature.
Fighting against the natural principles of the systems they inhabit. They are jumping off the cliff and wondering why it hurts so much when they hit the ground.
Exactly. Finding the way forces you to stop flapping your arms. It forces you to pause, analyze the underlying rules of the reality you are standing in, and make a conscious, strategic choice to align your behavior with those principles.
It completely shifts spirituality from an abstract feeling into an applied science. This whole exchange between Yixian Celestial and Zufeng, it isn't just an exercise in esoteric geometry.
No, it is a functional operating manual.
Look at the journey this text just took us on. We started by zooming in on a very localized system, the Earth universe. We mapped out 20 parallel worlds contained within 36 dimensional spaces.
We located the ultimate command center at the 0 point, acting as the foundational root directory for all of reality.
Right. And from that structural map, we unpacked the mechanics of the Trinity. We saw how the non-material essence provides the blueprint, how the spirit provides the raw animating electricity, and how consciousness emerges as the soul of the system.
We recognized that the Creator and the universe share the exact same anatomy.
And finally, we separated the passive, inescapable reality of the Tao from the active, conscious choice of walking the way. It takes us from the absolute macro-level design of the cosmos directly down to the micro-level friction of your daily choices.
Because knowledge of a system is only really useful if it dictates how you navigate through it. By identifying the mechanics of the universe, Shuifeng provides the exact criteria needed to evaluate whether your actions are creating harmony or suffering.
Which brings us to a final lingering thought for you to carry forward today. We explored the text's deeply profound argument that human consciousness eventually congeals into physical reality.
The laws, the buildings, the societies, the relationships.
Yeah, all of it. They are just invisible human ideas that have gathered enough structure and energy to actually manifest in the physical world.
As above, so below. The micro reflects the macro.
Right. So if the fundamental, unbreakable building blocks of any functional universe are structure, energy, and consciousness, look closely at the physical reality of your own life right now.
That's a challenging mirror to look into.
It is. Look at your daily routines, your stress levels, your environment, the work you produce. All of it is a localized universe that you are actively generating.
So you have to ask yourself.
Exactly. Are the results in your life stemming from chaotic, poorly written source code and misdirected electricity? Based on the strict structure of your daily habits, the raw energy of your attention, and the consciousness of your choices?
Wait.
Based on the consciousness of your choices, what kind of universe are you actually constructing? You have the map, and you understand the physics engine. Now you just have to decide how you are going to play the game.